Buenas tardes. Good afternoon. Those of you who got the book, do me a favor. Turn it to the back. Grab it, turn it to the back. Put your name on it. Everybody put your name on it, please. This assures no returns. Now it's yours. You can't go to Amazon and sell it back to them. It's yours. First, I want to thank you for the chance to speak with you today, to Samantha for inviting me. I guess as I was listening to Andres speak before me, I will do a few disclaimers first. Some of what I'm going to talk about, he's talked about. So it'll be a bit more of my story, and his story and mine are somewhat similar. In fact, so much so that I am the second speaker you hear today from Carolina, Puerto Rico. Second, my childhood hero was Roberto Clemente, who I got to stand next to when I was a little boy in what is today Roberto Clemente Stadium in Carolina, when I looked up to this giant of a man. And he even signed the picture and gave it to me because I was, of course, a little leaguer at the time. And I've lost the darn picture. Can you imagine what that would be worth today? I grew up in Puerto Rico until I was 16 years of age. Then I went to New York and did my high school and undergraduate work there, was commissioned as an Air Force officer, and went off into the Air Force and thought I was going to serve a career in the Air Force. In fact, ended up spending 12 years as an Air Force officer. But my first 6 years in active duty, I thought, this is exactly what I want to do. Until at one point my wife said, maybe we should get out. And I told the story over dinner last night. I said, get out of the Air Force. Have you not seen the flight suit? This is when, Top Gun was out and Tom Cruise was wearing a flight suit. I thought, are you crazy? And I thought, well, let me try not to get a job because I didn't want to get out. And I said, let me see if I made a deal with her. I said, we'll get out of the Air Force if I can get hired by a Fortune 50 company, not one of the Lockheeds or Grummons or people who I was doing work with because I didn't want to go into the defense industry. And I did not know just how much junior military officers are attractive to corporate America. And so Johnson & Johnson and 3M and Procter & Gamble made a few offers, and I had no choice. I had to accept one of them. And so I went to work for Johnson & Johnson and spent 18 years with them. And I had a number of different jobs in J&J, all of them in the medical device segment of J&J, Ethicon, and then DePuy Orthopedics. And I had a terrific, blessed career over those 18 years and achieved things that I never thought. That the third thing I have in common with your previous speaker, he mentioned Yauco, Puerto Rico. That's where my father was from. That's where my grandmother had a little farm. And so I spent so many Saturdays of my childhood cleaning up after goat poop in the back of my grandma's farm. And I never thought that a little kid from Carolina, Puerto Rico would have a chance to stand in front of an audience like this and tell you a little bit about my journey. But importantly, you should have heard from somebody as successful as Nina Vaca or some other speakers. That's why when they asked me to speak on this subject, I said, it's not about reaching my pinnacle. It's maybe about the School of Hard Knocks. The School of Hard Knocks is, of course, that place where, I don't know how many of you have graduated from the school, but I have 2 diplomas from the School of Hard Knocks. And I can tell you about things that I've done along the way that I wish should have done something different along the way. When I hear an introduction to an audience like this, I'm very humbled, and I kind of wish my mom could be around to hear it. I lost her to cancer about 14 years ago, far too young when she died. But I'm hoping she's looking down from heaven, and she's very happy about 2 things. One, that her son is here and speaking to you, and that he's published a book, because the first book, Leadership, The Legacy Leader, Leadership with a Purpose, came as a result of my mom just before she was going into surgery saying, I'm not happy with you. Why aren't you happy with me, Mom? I've been a good son. You never publish your work. And I told the story over dinner last night as well. She says, Mom, my work is not that good. She goes, I've read worst. And and I had 2. And I said, I'll get it done. And I was referring, so I was able to publish the first edition of The Legacy Leader. What you have in front of you is the second edition. Shortly before she died, and I was able to dedicate it to her and hand it off to her. And so that, I'm sure she's looking down, feeling proud about that. But more importantly, it's that sign that's behind me that she's really happy about. Because I must tell you, she was a faithful Kohl's customer. So she's happy that here I am. And I also have been a faithful Kohl's customer for many years. So there it is, full circle. When I heard Andres speak, I thought, what am I going to do? I didn't have time to go and change all of my slides. I didn't want to repeat everything that you've heard. So I thought, well, let me start by doing something off script, because whenever I get the stage, I don't have a choice but to talk to you about what I'm really passionate about. And that's, of course, the subject of leadership. And you heard a little bit about what is it, what isn't, and all that. And we all have opinions about that. The difference is I've written a book. If you have an opinion, write your own book. But I will tell you this about leadership. Nothing new has been written on leadership since Sun Tzu wrote the book 3,000 years ago, The Art of War. And some of you have heard me speak and have heard me say that before. And I believe that. I believe the fact is that there are many good books. And John Maxwell certainly is among the giants. Ken Blanchard, who I had the chance to spend some time with, personally with, and others are terrific authors of our day and gurus of the subject of leadership. And yet when you read their books, you realize there's nothing fundamentally new. And what is so fundamentally different about leadership is not that it's hard to do. It's that we just don't apply it. The principles that we think we should apply, we don't apply. That's, I think, the essence of what makes leadership tough. I will also tell you, and let's try this. Throw out the traits and characteristics you think a leader should possess. Shout them out. Integrity. Come on. What do you need from a leader? Humble. Passion. Vision. Loyalty. Honesty. Genuine. Transparency. Here's what you haven't said. Expert in finance. You haven't said expert in engineering. You haven't said expert in anything. You've talked about traits, but you've also mentioned so many of them that what we all really want is Superman or Superwoman to be our leaders. It's hard to find a leader that embodies all the things that we would all aspire our leaders to do. But I will tell you there are only two. I'll repeat, only two fundamental non-negotiables of leadership. All others are negotiable. If you're not good at communications, I can get you a communications person that can teach you how to speak. If you're not good at finance, that's all right. Hire yourself a strong CFO. I happen to have one. I'm not good at finance. I may know enough to be dangerous. If you're not good at whatever, you can find a Harvard business expert or somebody who could be your expert. But there are two fundamentals of leadership that without them, you can never, ever be the most effective leader that you could ever become. And those two are simply this: character and integrity. You violate those two, and the rest of it is done. Your credibility is shot. Your character and your integrity. To me, those are the two most fundamental principles of leadership that cannot be undermined. And they're so easy to undermine. All the others are negotiable. And I spend, in the first chapter of the book, I talk about character and integrity, and then I talk about the mechanics of leadership. But let me tell you the story of the book, and then I'll get into the subject of what today. So along the way, there's been the first book. I told you the story. It came as a result of my mom saying, get it done. I was able to get it done. It got some pretty good reviews, unbeknownst to me. I never expected that. And more importantly, I have two daughters. They were babies at the time. They're now grown women. And they got excited that Daddy had written a book. And they took it to school, and they were showing it off. And it motivated them to do some of their own writing. And so I never expected that book would go anywhere, but it got some pretty good reviews, and then I got to be invited to speak, and people say, you wrote a book? Oh, that's really good. And then people actually stood in line to get an autograph, which I thought, they don't have a clue what they're asking for. They're just lowering the value of the book once I put my membership to it. But essentially, the book became a platform from which I can talk about what I believe are the fundamentals of leadership. And I had the chance to lead a team during my years at Ethicon, one of the J&J companies. And for those who may be a little familiar with the medical device world or the FDA-regulated world, it takes a long time to take a product idea and go from product idea out to the market. If it's a pharmaceutical, it could take 7 or 8 years. If it's a medical device, it could take somewhere 2 or 3 years. This team that I had the pleasure of leading, despite the fact that I was the leader, was able to take an idea from basic concept idea to in-market FDA-cleared product launched in 10 months. I've never been able to repeat that success since. So this book was about what did we do right? What did that team do right? What did I maybe do as a leader to enable that team to achieve this breakthrough result? And so it became about the legacy leader driving breakthrough thinking and driving breakthrough results. And then one day I'm having lunch with my colleagues, and of course, what do you do when you have lunch with your colleagues? You talk about your bosses. That's what we all do, right? And so I'm having lunch, and we're lamenting and complaining about the fact that these leaders tend to forget things. Why do they forget things as they climb? As leaders climb, why is it that they tend to forget what's fundamental and important? And I said, yeah, it's like they get a lobotomy. And I thought, ooh, that's a pretty good title. The leader's lobotomy. And so it's a fable story about sort of what do you not forget? Make sure you don't forget the fundamentals. And I'll give you a very simple one, for example. Reserve parking spots. Bad idea. Bad idea. I know that. I knew that when I didn't have one, right? Those who don't have a parking spot think that's a bad idea because it sends the wrong signal. It sends signal that the leader is more important, and there goes the servant leadership concept right out the door because you got a parking spot and I got to park in the back, right? So, but as soon as you're the one that has the spot, it's like, whoa, it's a good thing now I got a spot, right? So don't forget, when you get to be there, give up the spot. Do away with the spot. It's those simple fundamental things that the book tries to embody and says, don't forget the easy things as you go. And then along the way, I said, well, if you understand the fundamentals of leadership, if you know how to apply them to drive breakthrough thinking, if you don't forget the things as you go along, what do you do next? Well, how about you evaluate yourself against those? And so that became the sequel to the Leader's Lobotomy called The Leader in the Mirror, which is about looking in the mirror and doing that 360 on your own. You don't need Myers. If you have the character and the ability to look in the mirror and ask him very tough questions about your style, about your passion, about your courage, about what you do right, about what you don't, and if you took the time to talk to a few of your mentors, coaches, and good friends and people who will tell you the truth, you might have the opportunity to truly determine where are you going right and where are you going wrong when it comes to your leadership. And so and I'm working on the sequel to that called The Leader as, well, I won't give it away. It's coming. For those who, there'll be a second, and there's actually a third edition of The Legacy Leader coming as well. But those 5 books, as important as they are to me, are not as important as these 2. Andres also, before we mentioned about his faith. My faith as a Christian, I've written two small, short little books. I don't believe a book should be long. If you can't read it between Chicago and Newark as a flight, it's too long. So I keep them short. Anyway, the one to the right is my more recent work, Christian Lessons from My Golden Retriever, whose name was JAG, Judge Advocate General. I think that if we all behave more like dogs, the world would be a better place. So this book is filled with just ideas about principles and things that we could do on a daily basis in our daily walk, including as leaders, that would make the environment more pleasant, the environment more productive, more engaging, more empowering. So my journey is culminating to where I am today. As Isaias mentioned, I became a grandfather on my birthday 8 months ago, my first granddaughter, and she is indeed the most beautiful baby in the planet. I have evidence. If you're not sure, just come at the break and ask me. I will prove it to you. I have all the evidence you need. But I've had the pleasure of moving across the country, having lived in Puerto Rico and across the country, and I've just finished moving back to the United States a month and a half ago, having lived in Belgium for a couple of years in Brussels. So I have had the chance to see diversity in a global, truly global way. My organization now is an organization that I lead of more 4,000 people, with the vast majority of them being not from the United States. In fact, the vast majority of the people that I work with on a daily basis live in either Sri Lanka or Malaysia, Australia, Japan, China, and many in Europe. So I get to see diversity from a different perspective, and I get to really understand that concept of diversity relative to how it applies to the workplace and relative to how, as a leader, I need to be sensitive to it to understand how to drive results. Now on to the subject that I was asked to speak on, which is this idea of the school of hard knocks. To me, you can read a lot of books, and you should. You can take a lot of education courses and get your master's and PhDs, and you should. But there's no better school than life. Unfortunately, when we're younger, right, you think you know it all. How many here didn't think they know it all when they were younger? Be honest. We all thought we knew it all, right? We knew it all. As sophomores, that's what the word means, right? Wise fool. And you got to be a sophomore twice in your life. And freshman, when you were in high school, and then again when you were in college. The School of Hard Knocks for me is something that if you haven't attended this campus, you should. But importantly, I'm going to try to share with you a couple of ideas that say, maybe you don't have to knock yourself against the same wall that I did. Maybe we can learn from each other. And I hope, some practical ideas here of things that I would suggest we don't repeat. So I'll start with this. And I saw it in one of the previous speakers' points. For me, education, be a lifelong learner, and importantly, a lifelong teacher. As a leader, I think this is really critical and important. If as a leader I don't think I'm still learning, still understanding, still gaining, then I'm done. I'm cooked. So I think you need to be a lifelong learner and a lifelong teacher. No one can take this away from you. You can lose a lot of things, but you cannot lose this. Second, you don't need to be the smartest person in the room, but for God's sakes, don't be the dumbest. Leave that to someone else. Right? I am in no danger of ever being the smartest guy in the room. Ever. In fact, I do everything I can to surround myself with brilliant people. And I know he mentioned before that he has the best team. He's wrong. I do. I have people around me who are incredibly talented. I have some women that I have the privilege of working with and who work on my team who are incredible. And I learn from them every single day. They keep me out of trouble. And they make my job running this global business very, very easy. But I understand that I can't be the dumbest guy in the room either. They don't expect me to be the smartest. Just don't. And if you have any doubt, just keep your mouth shut. Right? You know the old saying, right? Better to be thought a fool than to open your mouth and prove them right. So your level of interest as a person is directly proportional to your level of education. And by that, I do not mean formal education. I'm not saying the one with the PhD is the smartest. In fact, we all know that often that's not the case. I'm talking about street smarts. I'm talking about common sense. I'm talking about just being aware. I'm talking about putting Fox News and CNN so you understand the balance of the world. You cannot listen to the Rachel Maddow's and not listen to the other side with the Sean Hannity's. If you really want, you have to take the average of the two. But you have to become an educated person. You have to remain educated, and you have to really understand how the world is operating around you so that you have some level of interest and engagement and involvement. So the action, attain all the education you can. By the fact that you're here, I think it's evidence that you believe in that. You think it's important to continue to maintain some level of connection, some level of understanding. Number two, whatever job you have, focus on your current position. I can tell you that doing your job well today and whatever it is you're doing is what will enable what comes next, right? And when I was a little bit younger, you're like, what do I do next? What's my next job? Where am I going, right? And somebody, luckily early in my career, my corporate career, said to me, you know what, why don't you focus on what you're doing here? Because until you're doing this, as Nina Vaca said, do it great, be crazy good at this, we're not going to want to talk about what's next. If you want to have a development discussion, we ought not be having a performance problem discussion. So first and foremost, do your job and do it well. Current performance is a best indicator of future success. And if you don't like what you're doing, then you need to go do something you like, because you're not going to be really great at it if you don't like what you're doing. Gain a reputation for results. And you can only gain a reputation for results if you stick around long enough to actually do something. And that gets to a later point about how much should you bounce around in terms of one job to the next. So, whatever you do, be crazy good at it. I agree with Dina on that for sure. Next. I want to talk about networking. You heard a lot about it before. We've talked about it. You're here for networking. There are some things about it that I find that people commit errors and mistakes, pretty basic ones, when they're trying to network. When you network, learn from others. That's what networking is about, not just to be known by others. The more people that know you, if that's what your goal is, then just send a LinkedIn invite to everybody. That's not networking, right? Network to learn from others, to understand from others, to get from them their experiences, to connect with their network, not just to be known by them. The second thing that I'll tell you, and I don't know if that's on the list or not, maybe it's on my bullets next, but I remember early on in the career, when we were with my colleagues, we were saying, I'm going to have to go and network with the VP of this or the president of that. And here we were early in our careers, and maybe I was a manager or an associate director level, and I had great connections. Heck, I had connections because of my work with the Hispanic Organization of Leadership and Achievement, the ERG of J&J. I was known personally by the CEO of J&J. I'm down here, he's up here, right? You think, that's a great network. I'm known by the CEO of the premier company in the world for medical and for pharmaceuticals, Johnson & Johnson. He knows me by name. We chat, we have coffee together, right? I'm here, he's here. How could that be bad? Well, he retired. That's how it was bad. I'm still here. Get my point? I didn't need to be networking with the CEO. I needed to be networking with the directors and VPs who were going to be the CEO. So network at the right level. Who's going to help you? Because, literally I lost all the people who I knew. I was known by a whole bunch of VPs and directors, and they were in their, early 50s, like me now. And they were soon to be moving on to other things. And you're left figuring out, what do I do now? Well, the people who were influencing then didn't know you now. You have to start all over again. So careful about self-promotion. That's not what networking is about. In fact, quite the opposite. Promote others. Be the person who introduced somebody. Say, hey, have you met Lino, who's a colleague of mine here from the Prosponica board? Have you met Lino? Let me tell you about Lino, right? Use the network opportunity to promote others rather than promote self. Network to connect and promote others first, like I said. And by the way, on professional organizations, don't just be a member, but be active. That's where it happens, right? That's where people see, right? I have gotten to know Samantha not because she is the president of the chapter of the Milwaukee chapter of Prosponica, but because she's invited me. We've had to exchange. She's had to put up with my calendar changing. I mean, she's done all sorts of things. So I've gotten to see her now in action. That's the network that works, right? I now understand what she does and the passion that she has. We sat for dinner last night. I know a little bit more about her family. That's where the network happens. Now I have a vested interest in watching and seeing her and helping her and enabling her to succeed. That's a powerful network. You talked about mentor and be a mentor, find a mentor, and the question before about mentorship. I have a thought about it like everybody else on mentorship. I will tell you my opinion, my answer to the question of, so who's a mentor? You asked over here, how do you find one? Who is it? Anybody can be a mentor. It could be the janitor or it could be the CEO. It's not about what position they have. It's about what life experiences they have. It's about what wisdom they have. It's about how do they enable you to deal with whatever it is you're dealing with at the time. The question that you have, the issue that you're dealing with, whether it's a personal issue or a professional issue, it's an advice. It's a sounding board. It's someone who calls you at 6:30 in the morning and says, hey, how's it going? What you're up to? Did you consider this? I have a few of those, and I've been fortunate that every time I've taken a job or considered a job, I call them and I say, what do you think about this? Should I consider this path, that path? To me, that's a mentor. Be one, have several. But importantly, there's a difference between that and a sponsor. And that's a word we don't talk about much, right? We talk about sponsorship versus mentorship. Anybody know the difference between the two? Go ahead, Samantha. Tell me the difference between the two. What's the difference between a sponsor and a mentor? Thank you. A mentor shows you the way, a sponsor clears the way. A sponsor is someone who's actually in a position that can actually enable you to do something, or can either give you a job or help you get a job, that can actually physically do something for you. That's a sponsor. They may or may not be your mentor. A mentor is an advisor. If you're not a mentor, trust me, you'll enjoy it tremendously. Become one. Become one to as many as you can. Next. Remember that your career is a marathon and not a sprint. So you should focus on the depth of your experience rather than the speed of your upward mobility. I struggled with this, and I will use the analogy of early in my corporate career and in the military. So for those who are familiar with the military ranks for officer ranks in the Air Force, second lieutenant, first lieutenant, captain, major, lieutenant colonel, colonel, brigadier general, 1 star, 2 stars, right, all the way to 4 stars. Lieutenant, second lieutenant to first lieutenant, quick jump. First lieutenant to captain, quick jump. You go from a second lieutenant rookie when you graduate college to captain bars within 4 years. Pretty quick. You don't get to be a major, though, until about 9 or 10 or 11 or 12 years into your career. That's a long time to be in the middle management ranks, right? But those are formative years. It's the captain rank. That's the worker guy, right? That's the guy that's with the troops, taking the hills, charging forward. Those are the guys that are really doing the dirty work of the military, along with, of course, the enlisted men and women who really do all the heavy lifting. But those are the formative years. And then after that, major, lieutenant, colonel, colonel happens quickly. So if you think about a career, corporate career, it's sort of like the entry level to the first couple of jumps pretty quick. Then after that, you're going to sit at a level of manager, associate director, maybe even director, those middle management ranks or those junior, say, executive ranks. Those are formative years. Don't rush those. Too many younger folks want to rush that and can't wait to get that VP title. And let me tell you why that's a problem with that. I want you to picture a monkey climbing a flagpole. You've heard this before, right? I want you to picture a little monkey, got a little skirt on. That little monkey's got a little skirt on. You're not picturing, you're not playing with me. You got a skirt on, right? This little monkey's climbing the flagpole. Got that picture in your head? Okay, now the monkey is climbing the flagpole, and you're standing down below the flagpole, and you're looking up. What do you see? Nobody wants to say it, do you? I'll say it. Somebody wants to say, what do you see when you look up? Come on, somebody's going to be brave to say it. The monkey's butt. That's exactly what you see. You see the monkey's butt. You look up, and the monkey's exposed. We are the monkey. You want to climb that flagpole, the higher you go, the more your butt is exposed. You think I'm kidding? I'm not kidding. All right? You climb, and the exposure level goes up. So you should do a couple of things. One, cover your butt. That's not a CYA. How do you do that? Experience, education, network, being humble, learning your lessons along the way and not forgetting them, right? That's how you cover, because that way when you're climbing, you're not going to fall off. I'll make a less graphic analogy. For those of you who run on treadmills, set the treadmill to 4 miles per hour. You fall off the treadmill, no big deal. You can walk on a 4-mile-an-hour treadmill. You just jump right back on. Set the treadmill to 12 miles per hour. Now run on it. Fall off of that, see what happens. It's going to hurt. You ain't just going to bounce back. The higher you go, the harder you fall. So, lesson that I learned is don't fall. Get there when you're ready to get there. Get there when you know what you're doing. Get there when your chances of success are nearly guaranteed. That doesn't mean you can't stretch and be into stretch assignments. We talked about that before. Somebody said about, do you take a stretch assignment? Absolutely. But be ready. Be ready. So the higher the monkey goes up the flagpole, you'll never forget, the more of his, you know what, you can see. Less than 3 years in a position, and you risk what I call the corporate butterfly label. It takes 3 years, in my estimation, for somebody to take a job before they're ready to start thinking about, well, what's next? Why 3 years? First year, you're trying to figure out where the restrooms are. First year, you're just trying to get to know the organization. The first year, you're trying to understand who's who. Who's my team? Who's on my team? And if you're in anything, if you're blessed like me to work in a global organization, I mean, I've got to deal with literally every time zone of the world. I have a staff of tremendous vice presidents who report into me. None of them live in the same place I do. Not one. They all live from one extreme of the planet to the other. We're always on crazy time zones. I have to go visit with them. When I leave here tomorrow, I'm headed to Italy for a week. I come back from Italy, then I go to Malaysia, and then I go to Sri Lanka, and then I got to go to Tokyo. And that's all happening in the next 2 to 3 weeks. 300,000 air miles traveled last year, 300,000 the year before that. I don't recommend it. When they call you by name of United Airlines and it's not to kick you out of the plane, that's not a good thing. That is not a good thing. So it takes time to get to know your team. It gets time to get them to know you. It takes time. It takes a year before you figure out, where am I taking? What's my vision? What are my KPIs? What's my strategy? Where am I taking the team? Right? Year 1. Year 2 is to implement. Year 2 is to get the team. Now you got them going. Now you're moving. It takes a little time to start to see the results of that. And year 3 is to be around, to be accountable for the results. 3 years minimum. 5 years, great. 3 to 5 years. Man, do you know him for results? You put Tony in a job, he gets it done, and then he moves on. So don't be in such a rush. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Stick around, own the strategy, and demonstrate a result. So patiently chart and then navigate your career. I'm always impressed by these, and some of you may have the experience. You get a young MBA or something like that comes in for an interview, and they're like 25 years old. And so, typical interview questions, right? Well, what do you want to do? I want to be CEO. When? How about tomorrow? Then have a nice day. Go make your own way. Build your differentiators. Focus on what makes you unique, and let that be seen, heard, known. Be great at it. Be crazy good at whatever that is. Experiences, accomplishment, education, extracurricular, whatever it is you're good at. Let that be your platform. Let that be your platform. So identify and leverage your differentiators, invest in them, and modify along the way as necessary. I have a little bit of a reality check. There is a little bit of this that we need to be aware of. Unless you work for yourself, you work for someone else, and at the pleasure of that someone else. And as much as I like to come visit companies that have great, obviously, invest in their people, buildings like this, Kohl's, I believe Ansel, Johnson & Johnson, Care Fusion that I spent some time, the Air Force. Do I care about my people? Deeply. Deeply. But it's a business transaction. I go to work and I love what I do. I go to work and I do my best. I give 150%. I've given my sweat, blood, tears to this company for the past 6 years. And I did for 18 years at J&J, and I did it for a couple of years at Care Fusion, and I did it for 12 years in the Air Force. And you're going, damn, how old is this guy? So I know. But here's the thing. If Ansel stopped paying me on Friday, I do not go to work on Monday. Right? It's a business transaction. You work, you get paid. They stop paying, you stop working. They don't want you anymore. They'll help you to find a way, right? So, remember that. It's a business transaction. When you're no longer needed, so what do you do with that? Do you worry about it? No. Here's why I don't worry about it. Well, first, I'm too old to worry about it, number one. My kids are already educated. I've already paid for one wedding. I got the other one set aside. So at the stage of my life, I don't worry so much about it. But when I was a little bit younger, maybe I did worry a little bit more about it. But I tell you what gave me comfort. One, I have a strong family network, number one. Number two, I was prepared. Educationally, I knew I could get a job. Heck, you want to hear? Watch this. I got a backup plan. This is my backup plan. Ready for this? Do you want fries with that? I can get a job. I'm employable. I'm not going to fear what might be next if something doesn't come about where I currently am. All right? If you're willing to work hard, if you're willing to move, if you're willing to translate yourself, if you're willing to re-educate yourself, if you're willing to transform yourself, if you learn, there will be work. And if nothing else, start your own thing. But remember, do the best job you can do. Be the most effective person you can be. Be the most collaborative team player you can be. Be the strongest contributor to the team. And as long as they keep paying you, keep going back to work. As long as you're happy doing what you're doing. Because if you're not, you're going to spend 40 years of misery making other people miserable along the way. So, I'll leave you with this. I'm getting close to the end, and I'm going to try to give back a little bit of the time that we may be a little bit behind on. I started by talking a little bit about the book, The Legacy Leader. I chose the word very carefully because I do believe leadership is about the legacy you leave behind. At the end of the day, that's all you get to take with you. Nobody here has a choice about whether you're going to have a legacy or you're not. You're going to have a legacy. You're going to be remembered for something. You're going to remember by someone, whether it's just a few members of your family or an entire community or an entire nation. You're going to be remembered for something. The only question is, what will that something be? That's it. And if you get up in the morning and ask yourself, what do I want to be remembered for? And I'll tell you very quickly, when I was an overnight guest at Ken Blanchard's home, if you don't know who Ken Blanchard is, he's written all the one-minute manager books and all that. He's a tremendous Christian man who I believe is the guru of our time of leadership and management. And I spent some time with him at his home, and he read to me his eulogy. We sat at his dining table in his kitchen, and he read to me his eulogy, which he reads to himself every single day. Now, it's not morbid. Don't get me wrong. He doesn't have a death wish. But it's what he says, Tony, this is what I want my daughters to say about me when I'm gone. This is what I hope they say about me. And so he reads it to himself, and it's a full page, because it says it keeps me grounded on how I want to take this next step and the step after that and the step after that. Because that's how I want them to remember me. And if I want them to remember me for that, then I have to behave in certain consistent ways to that. And I thought, okay, that's brilliant, right? So defining your legacy, and I'll leave you with this word. First of all, the L in legacy, love what you do. If you don't, for goodness sakes, go do something else. Because you're going to make yourself and everybody else miserable. E is about empowering yourself and others, and only you can empower yourself. Nobody, any leader that says, I empower my people, doesn't have a clue what the word means. I cannot empower you as a leader. All I can do is create the environment where you can be empowered. But empowerment is something you take, not something you're given. Empowerment is about taking a chance and saying, I will, call me, I'll do it. Let me show you what I can do. And as a leader, all I've got to do is create the environment where that can occur. So empower yourself. Give of yourself, selflessly. The more you do that, in part, the reason I'm here, not just because Samantha is such a great person at twisting arms, is because I realize that I have to give. I have to give back. I've had the chance and the blessings that I've had, and I've been fortunate, and I've been lucky. And I think it's important to give back. You get to choose a few things in life every single day in the morning when you wake up. Your attitude is one of them. There are days when you're going to have a bad day, whether you like it or not. It's going to happen. Some things are going to go wrong. Life's going to throw things at you didn't expect. When you wake up, though, you have that choice, at least for the first few seconds before you step off of bed. How am I going to wake up in the morning? How am I going to feel today? Am I going to choose a lousy attitude? I don't know too many people get up in the morning and say, let me see how I can go to work and screw up today. There might be a few of you who know some people like that. I don't. Choose a positive attitude on a daily basis. Create something of lasting worth and value beyond yourself. Think about that legacy, what you want to be remembered for in the future. And at the end of the day, it truly is all about you. You do get to decide what that legacy is going to be. So, what do you want to be remembered for? That's the only choice you get in this whole argument. I found this slide interesting because when I was doing a bit of research about these sort of things that I wanted to talk to you about today, I thought, what do people who are at the end of their life say? What do they regret? And I remember listening to a pastor one time who also talked about what you weren't going to take with you when you were gone. And you've heard this before, I'm sure. You've never seen a Hertz pulling a U-Haul. Anybody ever seen a Hertz pulling a U-Haul? You ever seen a funeral procession with a U-Haul attached to it? No, right? We don't get to take it with us. All that stuff turns to dust. All that money that you've accumulated all these years. There's nobody in the deathbed who says, one more day at the office. That's what I really wanted. No, right? We talk about, I wish I had the courage to love other people. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I spent more time with my family. I wish I had the courage to express my feelings more openly, right? I can't tell you how much I regret not telling my mother how I love her more openly, more freely, like I tell my daughters and like they tell me. It just wasn't in the generation that I came from. I had my dad, who's still around. He also wasn't of that mindset, right? But now, hey, Dad, I love you. This just wasn't the way we were. That's not what you did in Carolina, Puerto Rico. That's not the way I was raised. But I wish I had done that with my mom. I wish I had let myself be happier. These are the types of things that people regret. So remember that life is a journey, and you ought to enjoy it along the way. So don't focus so much on how am I going to get there or here or here. There's a whole different pathway to get there. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you for your time, your attention. I hope I entertained you a little bit. I know you're desperate for a break, so thank you very much.
All right. Stay right here. Stay right here. So we're going to have a break in a couple seconds. There's a little more food, but we want to open it up again. Do I got the mics? If we have any questions for Tony? Oh, the other thing you got to know about Tony, he's a black belt in Taekwondo. And I remember in Houston, we were in Houston. Oh, in Houston. And we went out. I network differently. I like to network in different places and go out dancing with folks. Samantha calls me the salsa whisperer, and I like doing that. So we're walking back from the conference after going out dancing and having breakfast. It's about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. We're walking in. Tony's walking out in his shorts, about to go jogging. So that's why he looks like this, and I look like this. It's real simple. You got to put it in, and that's simple. It really is. It really is. It's very simple to do. But we're working on that. The questions. Do we got 2 questions? Oh, way in the back over there. Stand up, please. They're going to give you a mic. Oh. Mic?
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. So we missed the last slide. Could you please let us know what the Y was?
Y stands for youth.
Youth, thank you. That was all.
And if you got the book, it's in the book too. Others.
Another question here? Right here in the green.
Hello. As a Hispanic, what would you say has been your biggest challenge?
As a Hispanic, what's been my biggest challenge?
Yes.
I guess I never thought about as a Hispanic man, what's been my biggest challenge. I suppose it's, learning not to be a male chauvinist pig, I guess. Right? I tell you one thing that I did learn along the way, and we talked a little bit about this last night at dinner. When I came to, I did not understand, I did not think, I did not know, I didn't understand racism. I really didn't. Growing up in Puerto Rico, everybody was Puerto Rican, and so we all spoke Spanish, so I didn't get it, right? And my grandmother, who I then, sadly to my chagrin, learned later on in life, she must have been a really racist individual. Because when I was younger, she used to say to us, her grandchildren, cuando te cases, tienes que mejorar la raza. Wait, imagine that, right? When you get married, you have to improve on the race. Translation, you have to marry whiter than yourself. That's what she really meant. And I have evidence of that, right? My uncle, Benny, who's now probably 70 years old, his first wife was a absolutely gorgeous, beautiful, still gorgeous as a 70-year-old woman, a white, blue-eyed, blonde woman, American. And Benny, married her early in life. This is obviously, 50 years ago. And My grandmother loved this woman, loved her. And then they broke up, and then Benny remarried, and he remarried his now wife of 40 years. Blacker than black, Puerto Rican, dark, dark, dark. And my grandmother really never connected with her, right? And so I guess one of the things I learned as a Hispanic man is that we have race issues as well as Latinos. All right? As diverse as we are, whether you're Peruvian, whether you're Ecuadorian, whether you're Venezuelan, whatever you are, we have differences, and we have black and white. And I learned later on in life as an adult that there are dynamics of diversity among Latinos as well. And we have to learn to manage those just like you manage other dimensions of diversity, whether it's around, gay, lesbian, whatever they are. As Latinos, we have to be aware of the fact that our own biases do play out, even among the Latino community. And so for me, that's one of the things that was a fundamental lesson learned, that I didn't learn that until I was a little bit later on. And the second one I would tell you is that my mindset and attitude changed very quickly once I became the father of 2 daughters. Because then I started to realize I did not like how women were treated in the workplace relative to, even today, to how men are treated, the opportunities they receive, or whether they had, equal opportunity, if you will, across. And so that meant for me about 25 years ago, it became a passion of mine to really, not that I don't mentor and encourage and develop and hire men, but I do tend to focus more on women and their leadership development and their growth for that reason. So that's a tough question. There was one over here.
Yeah, one last question right here.
So, in one of the slides, you were saying that in terms of moving from one job to the other, you think that the ideal time frame to stay at a role is 3 years.
Yeah.
Were you specifically referring to a leadership role, or because
It's a good question.
Yeah, and my example is when you're an individual contributor and you've been working for a company for a certain amount of time, you gain an expertise, and then you're able to move around laterally, where you're expanding your knowledge to be able to move to the next level. 3 years may seem
A long time.
a long time.
That's a great question. It's a very fair question. I think, so let me back up a little bit and say, the important thing to decide before you take the next step, before you even ask for the next step, is, one, do you understand what you're currently doing? Are you doing it as well and better than anybody else? So the current job, how well are you doing it? 2, can you put your fingerprint on something and say, I own this, right? My team and we worked on this. Whether you're an individual contributor or a we, right? Can you point to something that has your DNA on it, has your fingerprint on it, and people recognize that, yes, Isaias, because of his effort, we got this result, we got this new product, we got this whatever it is, right? Do you have a result you can hang your hat on? And have you demonstrated that it really is, whatever we give you, we know we're going to get a result? So 3 years, you're right. I think from a management perspective, if it's a management role, a team leadership role, it may be shorter, right? Some teams only go, beginning to end, 12, 18 months. But I guess my message is, make sure you have results to back up, right? That you can put your fingerprint on it and say, I touched this, and because I was involved, we got this great result. And it's not so much whether you take the credit, it's whether others recognize you as having the credit for that. So all I'm suggesting is, people sometimes tend to focus too much on what's next, and then they get this corporate butterfly sort of mindset and reputation of this person just wants, to get promoted and get ahead. That's all I'm trying to avoid.